units that communicate by semaphore with flags from one point to another on the battlefield. The artillery is grouped into what we call batteries. These are groups of 4 to 6 guns each. One gun is called a piece, two gun is called a section. A gun is generally commanded by a sergeant. A lieutenant usually commands a pair of guns. A captain is generally in charge of a battery. On the infantry side and the cavalry side, the basic fighting unit is a regiment. When the war begins, a regiment is about 1,000 men strong, always generally from a single state, volunteers. But after a year and a half of fighting, a typical size of a regiment in Antietam is probably about half that size, perhaps 500 men or less. A regiment is commanded by a colonel, assisted by a lieutenant colonel, third in command a major. The regiments are made up of 10 companies each, of approximately 50 men each. Company is commanded by a captain, assisted by first and second lieutenants. At Antietam, the Union had an advantage in terms of the number of artillery, and the ratio that we have here today is approximately similar to what it was at Antietam. Today, you'll be seeing about 40 Union guns grouped into 8 6-gun batteries, posting them 3 battalions of about 25 Confederate guns. Folks, you'll notice on the left end of our battlefield, the northern end, the Confederate cannoneers, they are wearing red trim. That is the color that designates the artillery branch of the service. The cavalry, if you get a good close look at some of the horse soldiers, you'll notice that they have gold trim on their uniforms. The infantry tended to have light blue, particularly on the Union side trim, and this generally goes for both sides. During the Civil War, it was considered that the Union generally had the superior artillery in terms of their ammunition. They tended to have a higher proportion of rifle guns, which could fire farther and more accurately than the smoothbore guns. Confederate infantry at this point in the war was considered superior to Union infantry. And at this point in the war, the Confederates tended to have a little bit of an edge in terms of the horse soldiers, the cavalry. And that was due to the fact that many of these Southerners have come from farms and plantations, and they're very accustomed to being on horseback, whereas many of these Union cavalry soldiers are still becoming accustomed with their mounts. There are 2 main types of artillery on the battlefield. You have bronze smoothbore guns that have an effective range of approximately a mile. Sometimes file out beyond a mile, but usually weren't very accurate beyond a mile. And you have the black rifle guns made of wrought iron and cast iron. Spiral grooves inside the barrel of the rifle guns allow the rifle guns to fire farther and more accurately, out to about 1.5 mile accuracy, out to as much as 2 miles at extreme range. Folks, you'll notice in the distance to the left along the Confederate line, you can perhaps see one of the Signal Corps flags over there, the white flag with the red circle in the middle. The number of times you wave the flag a certain direction indicated a certain letter of the alphabet. And these men would usually occupy pieces of high ground and communicate from point to point. However, the main method of action on the battlefield is couriers, men on horseback who move from point to point with orders and messages. But the smoke from the guns and weather conditions can affect the ability of the Signal Corps to communicate, so couriers sometimes become the main method of communication. Generally, if you wanted a message to be ensured that it would arrive at its destination, you would send the same message by 3 different couriers. assuming that one courier could be lost or captured or killed. Another one, same thing could happen to. Generally, you felt if you got 3 messages sent through, one of them would get through. Historically, Confederate artillery was located behind the Confederate lines, just on the opposite side of the Hagerstown Pike along something called Hauser Ridge. If you listen carefully at times, you will hear bugle calls being made. Bugle calls quite often were used to communicate orders and messages over the din of battle. Folks, you may notice out in front of the Confederate line, we have something called skirmishers. You would generally send about your force, 1/10, out in front of your line at the beginning of a battle. What that does is skirmishers attract or draw enemy fire. And what that does is it helps you pin down the enemy's position, and it gives you some idea by the return fire of their strength. It also gives your own supporting infantry behind you some warning of the approach of the enemy. It tends to slow them down, stop their momentum a little bit, and give your main body a chance to brace itself for the shock that's about to hit it. It was not unusual at all for cavalry to dismount on horseback. As the battle starts to heat up, you start to notice the smoke on the battlefield. That is why the flags, the colors, are so important. Notice the flags in the middle of the unit's lines. In the confusion and noise of combat, you can always look to your flag in the middle of your line for your direction of movement. If you see the flag beginning to move forward, you know it's time to move forward. If you see the flag starting to head back through the haze and the smoke, it's probably a good idea to start heading to the rear, or you're probably going to become a prisoner, or worse. As far as the infantry is concerned, Democrats are using rifled